Robespierre. 24 hours before the guillotine, the fall no one saw coming. The blade of the guillotine does not discriminate, but the man who commands it must. For months, Paris has lived under the shadow of a single name, a name whispered in the dark corners of taverns and spoken with trembling reverence in the halls of power: Maximilien Robespierre. He is a man of small stature, meticulous in his dress, always wearing a perfectly powdered wig and a sky-blue coat that seems to defy the grime and blood of the revolution. They call him the Incorruptible. To his followers, he is the living soul of the Republic, the architect of a new world built on the foundations of absolute virtue. But to everyone else, he has become something far more primal. He is the personification of the Great Terror, a man who has turned the law into a divine scalpel, cutting away the impurities of France until only the pure remain. But what happens when the surgeon begins to see infection in everyone he meets? What happens when the man who rules by the word loses his grip on the very language of power? It is late July 1794, or as the revolutionary calendar calls it, the month of Thermidor in the year 2 of the Republic. The heat in Paris is suffocating, a heavy, wet blanket that clings to the skin and turns the narrow streets into an oven. In the Place de la Révolution, the guillotine has been working with industrial efficiency. The national razor is no longer a tool of political necessity. It has become a hungry god that must be fed every single day. The carts, the tumbrils, roll through the streets with a rhythmic clatter that has become the heartbeat of the city. People no longer look up when they pass. They simply lower their heads and hope that today their name is not on the list. This is the world Maximilien Robespierre has created, a republic of virtue, where the price of a single mistake is a one-way trip to the scaffold. But beneath the surface of this icy control, something is fracturing. Robespierre has been absent. For weeks, the man who dominated the Committee of Public Safety has withdrawn into his private rooms on the Rue Saint-Honoré. He has been seen walking alone in the woods, talking to himself, his mind consumed by a growing paranoia. He sees conspiracies in every shadow. He sees traitors in the eyes of his closest allies. He believes that the revolution is being poisoned by men who are not virtuous enough, men who are too greedy, too lenient, or too ambitious. In his mind, there is only one solution, one final massive purge to cleanse the Republic once and for all. He believes that if he can just remove this last layer of filth, the utopia he has promised will finally arrive. But there is a fatal flaw in his logic. By retreating from the public eye, he has allowed fear to ferment. In the National Convention, the deputies are no longer just afraid of the revolution. They are afraid of him. They watch the empty seat where he used to sit, and they wonder if he is at home, writing their names on a piece of paper. The atmosphere is like a tinderbox, waiting for a single spark to ignite. And on the 8th of Thermidor, Maximilien Robespierre decides to provide that spark. He decides it is time to return to the stage. He believes his voice is still his greatest weapon. He believes that when he speaks, the world will tremble and obey, just as it always has. He does not realize that he is about to walk into a trap of his own making. The morning of the 8th of Thermidor begins with an eerie stillness. Inside the Hall of Machines, where the National Convention meets, the air is thick with the smell of sweat and old parchment. The deputies are gathered, hundreds of men who have survived the last 5 years of chaos by knowing when to cheer and when to stay silent. They are survivors, opportunists and fanatics, all bound together by a shared, paralyzing dread. When Robespierre finally enters the room, the silence is instantaneous. He walks to the tribune with a measured, deliberate pace. He adjusts his spectacles. He lays his notes out on the podium. He looks out over the sea of faces, men who were once his comrades, men he has shared meals with, and men he is secretly planning to kill. He begins to speak. His voice is high-pitched, thin, but it carries a weight that seems to press down on the lungs of everyone present. He speaks for 2 hours. It is a masterpiece of psychological warfare. He talks of the monsters who are trying to ruin the Republic. He talks of a vast hidden conspiracy that has infiltrated the very heart of the government. He claims that there are traitors within the Committee of Public Safety and the Committee of General Security. He paints a picture of a nation on the brink of ruin, saved only by his own unwavering hand. But then he makes the mistake that will cost him his life. He tells the room that he has a list of these traitors. He tells them that the enemies of the people are sitting among them at this very moment, but he refuses to name them. The silence that follows this announcement is not the silence of respect. It is the silence of a cornered animal. In that moment, Robespierre has committed the ultimate sin of a tyrant. He has made the threat universal. If he had named 10 men, the other 600 would have cheered as those 10 were led away. They would have felt the cold relief of the spared. But by naming no one, he has threatened everyone. Every man in that room, from the most radical Jacobin to the most moderate deputy, suddenly feels the phantom touch of the blade against his neck. They look at each other, and for the first time in months, their mutual fear of Robespierre becomes greater than their fear of each other. As Robespierre steps down from the tribune, he expects the usual applause. He expects a motion to have his speech printed and sent to every commune in France, the traditional sign of total victory. Instead, there is a murmur of dissent. A few brave souls begin to ask questions. "Name the men you accuse," they cry. "Give us the names," Robespierre demurs. He tells them he will reveal the names when the time is right. He thinks he is being clever, keeping them in suspense, maintaining his power through uncertainty. He does not see the glances being exchanged between the deputies. He does not see the men like Tallien, Fouché and Barras, men who know they are likely on that list, realizing that they have exactly 24 hours to act, or they will be dead by sunset tomorrow. Robespierre leaves the convention feeling triumphant. He goes to the Jacobin Club that evening, where he is greeted like a god. He reads his speech again, and the crowd roars in approval. His loyal lieutenant, Saint-Just, the angel of death, stands by his side, his face an unreadable mask of cold conviction. Saint-Just tells him that tomorrow they will strike. They will purge the committees and the convention. They will finalize the list. Robespierre returns to his lodgings, perhaps sleeping the sleep of the just, convinced that his Republic of Virtue is only one more day of blood away from reality. But across Paris, in the shadows of the night, the traitors are not sleeping. They are meeting in secret rooms, huddled over maps and lists of their own. They know that Robespierre's power rests on a fragile pillar, the belief that he is untouchable. They know that if they can break the spell of his voice, if they can stop him from speaking, they can destroy him. They spend the night counting heads, making promises, and stoking the flames of a desperate, shared terror. It is a coup born not of ideology, but of pure raw survival. They aren't trying to save France, they are trying to save their own heads. As the sun begins to rise on the 9th of Thermidor, the city of Paris is unaware that it is about to witness the most dramatic collapse in political history. The heat is even more intense than the day before, a physical weight that seems to heighten the tension. Robespierre dresses with his usual care. He powders his hair. He buttons his blue coat. He is the image of order in a world he believes is chaotic. He walks toward the convention, unaware that he is no longer the predator. The roles have shifted in the dark. The man who has spent years sending others to the guillotine is about to find out that the machine he perfected has no loyalty to its creator. The hall is packed. The atmosphere is electric, vibrating with a nervous energy that feels like it could shatter the windows. Robespierre's ally, Saint-Just, takes the tribune first. He intends to deliver a speech that will set the stage for the arrests. But he barely gets through the first paragraph. He is interrupted, not by a question, but by a roar of defiance. Tallien, a man who knows his lover is in prison and his own head is on the block, leaps to his feet. He brandishes a dagger and screams that the convention must be delivered from the new Cromwell, the new tyrant. This is the moment the world changes. The spell is broken. For the first time, the deputies do not cower. They begin to chant, "Down with the tyrant!" Robespierre rushes to the tribune, his face pale, his eyes wide behind his spectacles. He tries to speak. He opens his mouth to command the room, as he has done 100 times before. But the noise is deafening. They ring the bells to drown him out. They scream over his voice. He turns to the different factions of the room, pleading for a hearing. He turns to the plain, the moderate center he has always manipulated, but they turn their backs on him. "The blood of Danton chokes you," someone screams, referring to the former friend Robespierre sent to the blade only months earlier. Robespierre gasps. his voice failing him, his throat dry from the heat and the sheer overwhelming shock of the rebellion. He, the man of the word, is being silenced. He is losing his power in real time, stripped of his authority not by an army, but by the very noise of the democracy he claimed to represent. The decree is shouted out over the din. The convention votes for his arrest. Not just him, but his brother Augustin, Saint-Just, Couthon and Lebas. The incorruptible is no longer the head of the state. He is a prisoner. But the day is far from over. As the guards lead them away, the city of Paris itself begins to stir. The Commune, the local government of Paris that remains loyal to Robespierre, refuses to recognize the arrest. They send out the call to arms. They open the prisons and whisk Robespierre and his allies away to the Hôtel de Ville, the city hall. For a few brief hours, it looks like a civil war is about to erupt. Robespierre sits in a grand room surrounded by his loyalists, while outside, the cannons of the National Guard are being wheeled into the square. He is at the center of a storm, yet he seems paralyzed. He is a man of laws and speeches, not a man of action. While his enemies are mobilizing, he is waiting. He is waiting for a sign, for a legal justification, for the people to rise up and save him. He does not realize that the people are tired. They are tired of the blood. They are tired of the fear. And they are tired of him. The night of the 9th of Thermidor descends upon Paris like a shroud, but it is a night without rest. In the heart of the city, the Hôtel de Ville stands as a fortress of desperate men. Inside, Maximilien Robespierre sits in a room draped in the remnants of royal grandeur, now repurposed for the revolution. The air is thick with the smell of candle wax, stale sweat, and the metallic tang of gunpowder. Outside in the Place de Grève, the cannons are pointed toward the streets, manned by the few units of the National Guard still loyal to the Commune. But the silence in the square is more terrifying than the roar of battle. The crowds, the legendary sans-culottes who once broke the gates of the Bastille, are beginning to drift away. They are hungry, they are tired, and they are confused. They were told Robespierre was the soul of the Republic, but now the National Convention has declared him an outlaw. In the legal language of the French Revolution, the word outlaw, hors-la-loi, is a death sentence in its purest form. It is the ultimate irony. Robespierre, the lawyer from Arras, the man who lived by the strict letter of the law, has been stripped of the law's protection. Under the very decrees he helped craft, an outlaw requires no trial, no defense, and no witnesses. Identification is enough. Once your identity is confirmed, you are sent to the blade within 24 hours. As he sits at a table, staring at a proclamation he is supposed to sign to incite a general insurrection, Robespierre is paralyzed. This is the obstacle he cannot overcome, his own soul. He is a man of the word, a man of the book. To sign that paper is to admit that the law has failed, and that he is nothing more than a common rebel. He looks at his younger brother, Augustin, who has voluntarily joined him in this death trap. He looks at Saint-Just, who remains eerily calm, his arms crossed, watching the door as if waiting for a lover rather than an executioner. Saint-Just urges him to act. "Right," he says, "in the name of the people, sign the order." But Maximilien's hand trembles. He picks up the pen, but the ink dries before it touches the paper. In his mind, 1,000 voices are screaming. He sees the faces of those he sent to the guillotine: Danton, who laughed at the foot of the scaffold; Camille Desmoulins, who pleaded for his life; the nameless thousands whose blood has turned the soil of France into a swamp. He believed their deaths were the price of a perfect world. But as the minutes tick toward midnight, the perfection he dreamed of is dissolving into the humid night air. The psychological weight of the moment is suffocating. Robespierre has spent his entire life crafting a persona of the incorruptible. He convinced himself that his personal will was the will of the nation. But now, the nation is turning its back. He can hear the distant clatter of hooves on the cobblestones. The convention has organized its own forces. Paul Barras, a man of cold steel and no conscience, is leading the troops of the Republic against the man who claims to be the Republic. The obstacles are no longer just political. They are existential. If he signs the order, he becomes a dictator. If he does not, he becomes a martyr. But he is a martyr who has lost his faith. He realized too late that the revolution was never a movement of virtue. It was a machine of survival, and he has simply run out of enemies to feed into its gears. Outside, the rain begins to fall, a light, warm drizzle that does nothing to cool the fever of the night. The National Guardsmen in the square, hearing that the convention has outlawed their leaders, begin to melt into the shadows. They do not want to die for a man who cannot even bring himself to sign a piece of paper. The cannons are left abandoned. The great doors of the Hôtel de Ville are no longer guarded by a wall of men, but by a thin line of terrified loyalists. Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere shifts from defiance to a grim, heavy despair. They know the end is coming. They can feel the walls closing in. Robespierre's internal monologue is a fractured mirror. He wonders where it went wrong. Was it the festival of the Supreme Being, where he stood atop a mountain like a new Moses? Did the people see him then not as a servant but as a master? He had wanted to give them a god of reason, but he had only given them a new reason to fear. He had turned the Republic into a monastery of blood, where the only sin was to be human. And now humanity was coming for its revenge. He looks at the pen again. He begins to write the first two letters of his name, Ro, and then he stops. A single drop of ink falls onto the parchment, a black stain that looks like a bullet hole. Suddenly the silence of the building is shattered. The sound of boots on the grand staircase, the splintering of wood, the screams of the few defenders left in the hallways. The convention's troops have breached the perimeter. They are coming up the stairs, and they are not coming to make arrests. They are coming to end the terror. In the council chamber, panic takes hold. This is the turning point, the moment where the high drama of political philosophy collapses into the raw, ugly reality of physical violence. Lebas pulls out a pistol and ends his life with a single shot to the head. Augustin Robespierre rushes to the window and throws himself out, landing on the stone steps below, his legs shattered, his body a broken heap in the dark. Couthon, the paralytic, tries to crawl away, his useless legs dragging behind him, until he falls down a flight of stairs, his head cracking against the marble. And then there is Maximilien. He is sitting at the table when the doors burst open. A young soldier named Merda, or perhaps it was a self-inflicted wound. History is as blurred as the smoke in the room, shouts an accusation. A shot rings out. The sound is deafening in the confined space. Robespierre does not die. Instead, the bullet strikes him in the face. It shatters his lower jaw, tearing through the skin and bone, turning the mouth that once commanded the fate of millions into a mangled, bloody ruin. He falls from his chair, a muffled cry escaping his throat. There is no more speech. There are no more appeals to virtue or the Supreme Being. There is only the agonizing, white-hot pain and the warm flow of blood soaking into his white cravat. The soldiers swarm the room, but they stop when they see him. They see the god of the revolution lying on the floor, clutching his face, his eyes wide with a shock that transcends physical pain. This is the man they feared. This is the man who held the power of life and death over every citizen of France. And now he is nothing more than a wounded animal, making wet, gurgling sounds as he tries to breathe through the blood. They do not offer him a doctor. They do not offer him a bed. They pick him up like a sack of grain and carry him out into the night. The journey from the Hôtel de Ville back to the center of the city is a gauntlet of mockery. The very people who would have cheered for him 24 hours ago now spit at him as he passes. They see his shattered jaw, held together by a crude bandage, and they laugh. They see the blood dripping onto his beautiful sky-blue coat, the coat he wore to celebrate the Republic, and they see the end of an era. He is taken to the Committee of Public Safety, his own seat of power. They lay him on a large wooden table, the same table where he signed the death warrants of his friends and enemies alike. For hours he lies there, a spectacle for the curious and the vengeful. People come to look at him, to poke at him, to insult the man who can no longer speak back. He is a living corpse, a prisoner of his own broken body. He watches the sun rise on the 10th of Thermidor, the light creeping across the floor of the room he once ruled. He can hear the sounds of the city waking up, the sounds of a Paris that is suddenly, miraculously, no longer afraid. The physical agony is immense, but the mental torment must be greater. He is a man who believed in the immortality of the soul and the triumph of the just. Now, he is being treated like a piece of refuse. He is forced to listen to his captors talk about the guillotine. They joke about how the blade will have a hard time with a neck so stiff. They talk about the list of names he refused to reveal, and how those men are now the ones who will watch him die. In these hours on the table, Robespierre is no longer a politician. He is the embodiment of the revolution's failure. He is the father who was devoured by his own children. He wanted to create a republic of virtue, but he only succeeded in creating a republic of the grave. And now, the grave is opening for him. He lies in the silence of his own shattered mouth, realizing that the ultimate end of the terror was not a perfect world, but a lonely, bloody table in a room full of people who hate him. The clock on the wall ticks with a mechanical indifference. Each second is a step closer to the Place de la Révolution. Each second is a step closer to the blade. And as the morning heat begins to rise, the sound of the tumbril, the cart that carries the condemned, can be heard in the distance, its wheels grinding against the stones, coming to collect the man who once thought he was the master of destiny. The sun of the 10th of Thermidor has reached its zenith, casting long, harsh shadows over the courtyard of the conciergerie. This is the antechamber of death, the final stop for every soul the revolution has deemed unnecessary. For months, Maximilien Robespierre has been the one who signed the orders that filled these cells. Now he is their most famous occupant, but he is not the man who entered the history books. He is a broken, silent figure, lying on a pallet of straw, his jaw still bound by a blood-soaked bandage that is beginning to stiffen in the heat. He cannot speak. He cannot protest. He can only watch through half-closed eyes as the machinery of justice he helped perfect turns its cold iron face toward him. The legal process is a mockery of his own design. Because he was declared an outlaw by the National Convention, there is no need for a trial. There are no witnesses to be heard, no defense to be mounted, and no jury to deliberate. The law of 22 Prairial, the very law Robespierre championed to accelerate the Great Terror, now demands his own head without delay. He is brought before the Revolutionary Tribunal one last time, but only for the purpose of identification. The judges, men who once trembled at his nod, now look at him with a mixture of loathing and immense relief. They confirm his name. They confirm the names of Saint-Just, Couthon, and his brother Augustin. The sentence is pronounced with a cold, bureaucratic finality: execution within the hour. The transition from the prison to the tumbril is a descent into a special kind of hell. As Robespierre is led out, his legs weak, his sky-blue coat now a tapestry of filth and dried blood, he is greeted by a wall of sound. It is not the silence of respect he once commanded. It is a roar of primal, unadulterated hatred. The people of Paris, the sans-culottes who once saw him as their messiah, have turned. In their eyes he is no longer the incorruptible. He is the monster who made them afraid to speak in their own homes. He is the man who turned their neighbors against them. He is the reason the smell of blood has hung over the city like a permanent fog. The journey to the Place de la Révolution is intentionally long. The cart, a simple wooden tumbril filled with 22 condemned men, grinds slowly over the cobblestones. The heat is a physical presence, a heavy, humid weight that makes every breath a struggle. Robespierre sits at the back, his back against the wooden slats. He looks out at the city he tried to save, the city he tried to reshape in his own image. The cart passes by the house on the Rue Saint-Honoré, where he lived for years in simple, virtuous austerity. The windows are shuttered. The family that loved him is gone or in hiding. A woman leaps onto the side of the cart, screaming into his face, "Go down to hell with the curses of all the mothers of France." He does not flinch. He cannot. He is already a ghost. This is the psychological peak of his fall. Robespierre, the man of the word, is being escorted to his death in a parade of silence. Every street corner is crowded with people drinking, cheering, and dancing. The terror is ending, not with a whimper, but with a carnival. He sees the faces of the people and realizes the ultimate truth of power. It is a loan, not a gift, and the interest is paid in blood. He had thought he could force people to be virtuous through fear, but he had only succeeded in making them crave the end of the fear at any cost. The Republic of Virtue was a dream. The guillotine was the only reality he had actually built. As the cart turns into the massive square, the The sight of the guillotine rises up against the summer sky. It is a tall, slender silhouette of wood and steel standing on a high platform. To Robespierre, it must look like the very God he tried to invent, a silent, impartial judge that waits for everyone. The crowd here is massive, a sea of thousands that stretches back to the gardens of the Tuileries. The noise is a physical force, a rhythmic chanting of "Down with the tyrant." One by one, his companions are led up the steps. He has to watch. This is the final cruelty of the executioner. He watches as his brother, broken and bleeding from his fall, is carried to the plank. He watches as Couthon, unable to stand, is struggled into position by the assistants. And he watches Saint-Just. The angel of death remains defiant to the last, looking at the blade with a cold, analytical gaze, as if he is studying the physics of his own end. When the blade falls for Saint-Just, a roar goes up from the crowd that seems to shake the very foundations of the square. Then it is his turn. Robespierre is helped to his feet. He is weak from blood loss and the grueling heat, but he finds the strength to walk up the wooden stairs. Each step is a hollow thud that echoes in the sudden, expectant silence of the crowd. He reaches the platform. The executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson, a man who has performed this ritual thousands of times, approaches him. There is one final agonizing moment of physical horror. To position his neck properly in the lunette, the executioner must remove the bandage that holds his shattered jaw together. Sanson reaches out and rips the blood-caked cloth away in one swift motion. A scream erupts from Robespierre's throat, a high, piercing, animal sound of pure agony that rings out across the silent square. It is the only sound he has made in 24 hours. It is the sound of a man being stripped of his last shred of dignity. The crowd gasps, a collective intake of breath at the sheer brutality of the moment. His jaw hangs uselessly, his face a mask of gore. He is pushed onto the plank. The wooden collar is slammed shut over his neck. He looks down. He can see the basket, filled with the sawdust of those who went before him. He can smell the copper of the blood. He has exactly 3 seconds of consciousness left. In those seconds, does he see the face of the Republic? Does he see the supreme being he worshipped? Or does he finally see the truth, that he was just a man, flawed and frightened, who mistook his own shadow for a light for the world? The heavy blade is released. It slides down the tracks with a metallic hiss. The thud is heavy and final. The head of Maximilien Robespierre falls into the basket. The executioner reaches in, grabs the head by the powdered hair, and holds it high for the crowd to see. The silence lasts for a heartbeat, and then Paris explodes. It is a sound of joy so intense it borders on madness. People embrace in the streets. They weep with relief. They shout that the terror is over. The man who thought he was the soul of the revolution has been discarded, and the revolution itself feels a sudden, sharp intake of air, as if it has finally finished its long, bloody meal. But the end of Robespierre is not just the end of a man. It is the end of an era of absolute, terrifying certainty. Within days, the prisons of Paris begin to open. Thousands of people who expected to die are suddenly walking free, blinking in the summer sun. The Committee of Public Safety is stripped of its power. The law of 22 Prairial is repealed. The Great Terror evaporates almost as quickly as it began, leaving behind a nation scarred, exhausted, and deeply cynical. History would remember Robespierre in 1,000 different ways. To some, he would remain the great, incorruptible, the only man who truly cared about the poor and the virtuous. To others, he would be the first modern dictator, the man who proved that the road to utopia is always paved with the bodies of the impure. But the truth lies in the silence of that final scream. It reveals that the revolution was never about one man's vision. It was a chaotic, hungry force that no one could truly control. Robespierre thought he was the driver of the machine, but he was merely its most famous fuel. As the bodies are tossed into a common grave and covered with quicklime, so that no relic of them remains, the lesson of 9th Thermidor settles over France. It is a lesson about the danger of a man who believes he is more than human. It is a lesson about the law and how easily it can be turned into a weapon. And most of all, it is a lesson about the guillotine. The blade does not care for virtue. It does not care for the Republic. It only waits. It waits for the next man who thinks he can use it to build a better world, only to realize in his final 3 seconds of life that the machine always wins. The revolution had finally run out of enemies, and in its hunger, it did the only thing it knew how to do. It reached out and devoured its father. The Republic survived, but the dream was dead, buried under the weight of 1,000 heads, ending with the one that had tried to command them all.